We're here with Chirs D today from the Cult Film Companion podcast, which has become one of my new favorite podcasts to listen to. This is Marco, of course, and with me as always is Zach.
Hello.
I'm a huge fan of, I guess, what you would call retro movies. Especially, well, retro to me means the 80s, but we're going to let Chris explain it better because that's what he does. And we're going to talk to Chris about all sorts of different things today, about his life a little bit. We'll go as deep as he lets us. And we'll also talk about his podcast and his other projects. So, Chris, thanks for being on the show with us today. It's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. I always, if I can do a podcast, and it doesn't mean that I have to do much prep work or actually handle the engineering, then I'm always on board. So
it's a lot of fun, isn't it? Yeah, it's great. I almost feel like I wish I could just do that. Just surf between podcasts all the time.
That'd be a lot of always fun. The guest star.
Right.
Always the guest star, never the star.
Actually, you'd have nothing to talk about. It's like, so what do you do? Well, nothing. I just
I'm just you throw me a topic and I will do my best to talk or bullshit my way through it.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Absolutely.
Well, all bullshit aside, tell us about the Cult Film Companion for those that haven't heard about it yet.
So I started a Facebook page just channeling my love of cult movies. And during COVID, I decided that I might as well, had some extra time on my hands, might as well try to do a podcast, and movies seemed like the obvious choice. But as someone that doesn't get as hyped or thrilled for the latest movies that are coming to your multiplex, I started looking around my collection, because I am a physical media collector, and I was going to do just horror, but then I didn't want to be pigeonholed by just doing horror movies, and considering that there's so many horror movie podcasts out there, cult movies have such a loose definition that I can get away with doing a lot of different stuff on my show. So, because anyone that I've talked to has like a different definition of what makes a cult movie. I have my own personal thoughts on it. But
what's your definition of a cult movie? Because now I'm curious.
Yeah, Sarah.
I don't know if I have a definition. There are a couple of things that come to mind when it comes to making. First of all, I don't think that you can ever set out to make a cult movie. I think that if you set out to make a cult movie, you're going to make something. But I think that a cult film kind of grows its reputation organically. 9 times out of 10, these are not the things that were big blockbuster movies. A lot of them found their audience in home video, back when video stores were a thing, or cable TV, back like when HBO and Cinemax and Showtime would just show movies and not focus so much on their original programming.
But do you feel that how you discover a movie or a TV show also affects that? You know, sometimes it's late at night, or you're on some, you it's a tape you found at the back, a forgotten shelf in a video store. Like, we're going back in time now, I know, but
yeah. Well, the thing with video stores is I always remember going around and looking at when, and I don't want to drag modern movie posters through the mud, but back in the day, it seemed like they would treat cover art as art. Yeah. They would actually have artists doing, people. It wasn't all done on a computer. You're not just.
It's very slapdash now. You can even I find errors all the time because I use Photoshop as a hobby. And I know Zach's eyes are just as keen. Mm-hmm. And there's so much error and sloppiness in modern movie posters. It kind of blows my mind. It's very you lack, or it doesn't. I don't lack, but rather it doesn't deserve the same respect, if that's fair.
No, because you've got people that actually, you had like artists doing art with their hands, and they would have a canvas and they would either paint or color or sketch, and it wasn't every it almost seemed, and I'll just use them because they're easy to pick on in um this circumstance. Like every MCU movie poster, not
Okay,
everyone,
yeah.
but I'll say 90% of them are a bunch of faces. All
Yeah.
You got a bunch of faces either facing directly at you or they're
Yeah.
looking off to the side.
Like a bad
And
bouquet.
yeah,
Green bouquet.
and another thing that I would say, that a cult movie is not something that, if I was in the marketing, and this is a reason why I don't think cult movies do very well initially at the box office, is because they're not easy to pigeonhole or put into a box very easily to say, especially when you have all these intellectual properties that already exist and are being, you know, turned into, just trying to drag every last penny out of them. Um, I think that if I had to market a cult movie, I wouldn't want that job. I wouldn't want to cut a trailer for a cult movie because usually you're going all over the place with genres. There may be twists and turns or characters you don't even want in your trailer. But if I had to cut a trailer, again, I'm just going to pick on Marvel because it's easy. If I had to cut the trailer for Ant-Man, you throw in some quippy one-liners, the funniest lines in the movie. You shows a
Mhm.
couple scenes of a battle. You show the villain, or you show the lead up to the villain, and you end it on a cliffhanger. And again, um, another thing with movies like that is that your audience is already built in there. You already have an established audience that are going to go see these movies regardless.
Yeah, it's
Um,
more like teasing the candy. And don't you find, I find like a lot of modern, especially modern trailers are very crescendo like. They very sort of, they build up,
I feel like
sort of
they
like an
just tell the whole
orchestra.
story of the movie most
That
of the time
too,
too. It's
yeah.
like, oh, that trailer was just a synopsis. Like, I don't even need to watch the movie anymore.
Yeah, I hate that. I absolutely bristle at that because it's just, I like mystery. Sometimes, I mean, even, another thing that is a quirk, it's like a quirk with me, I guess, but, a teaser trailer. That makes no sense to me. Either it's a trailer for the movie or it's the movie. What is a teaser trailer? The teaser trailer for the trailer? I mean, I guess that's what it is.
I'm trying to think, and there's some examples, and the only ones that come to mind that are just random examples. But there was a movie called Toys, starring Robin Williams,
One of my favorites.
and the trailer doesn't show any footage from the movie. It's like him standing in a field,
Yeah.
and it's not a very good movie. But the third Texas Chainsaw Massacre trailer is it's a very short mini movie about, instead of finding the sword in the stone like King Arthur and Lancelot, it's, Leatherface finding a chainsaw in the lake.
Oh, that's
but
pretty cool.
but it is, it's like, and that makes me want to see the movie. If you're already showing me basically with the trailers, if you get a certain trailer company to cut your movie, they're going to put in the best stuff. You don't even need to see the movie. like
Yeah.
like I can't tell you the last time I watched the Fast and the Furious movie because I don't have the patience for them, but also just because I'll watch the trailer for it and I've already seen. So I see a car going off a helicopter through a building, and I'm like, well, that's probably the best scene in the movie. I've already seen it. I don't need to see the movie now.
Yeah,
And
because you're not watching that movie for the plot.
no, you're not. And anyone that says that they are, ask them to explain the plot, how those movies have evolved. Because
My goodness, yeah.
I remember I distinctly remember the first one, and there's no way in hell that those characters from that first movie are the same character, are supposed to be the same people now that we've reached 8, 9, and 10.
Right, because they become like superhuman level, like dexterity and reflexes, and
Jason Statham movie, basically.
I love me some crazy Jason Statham movies like Crank. And Crank
Crank
2.
is an
So
excellent
good.
movie.
Transporter. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, he's got some good stuff.
Yeah.
Once he gets to
Um,
Expendables, I'm like,
Yeah, that's a movie I should have loved because man,
right.
that is a combination of my youth in the 80s, right? It's like masculinity and action. Like I was all about that. Like we were talking about this before, Zach and I, about how like when I was young, I liked older heroes. I didn't like, some 15-year-old who has superpowers and saves the world. I want to see some gristled, middle-aged guy. He's had enough and he's got all this like,
Too old for this
experience.
shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was very 80s, which I liked, the older hero, if you will. So,
but again, I would say not that it's trying to be a cult movie, but I think that the Expendables was, you can almost tell when a movie's trying too hard.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
Like and I'm using this figuratively, obviously, but everyone is in those movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, yeah, but I think that's their downfall though, is that they didn't try hard enough in the sense of like writing a good enough story, creating
Yeah.
good enough like intrigue and everything. They didn't have any real hook to me. Like it just seemed like, look at all these stars.
It
Now
is,
you
yeah.
must watch, because why wouldn't you watch this?
You totally feel like just the framing alone, like the way the movie's shot, like, and now Arnold Schwarzenegger, and now Van Damme. It's just like an award show. Like you're looking at a shelf full of trophies. But
It's
yeah.
one of those style over substance.
Yeah,
If you yeah, I mean, if you look at the cover of the Expendables movie, you got Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Willis. I think Harrison Ford showed up at one point.
Oh, he
Dolph
did. Yeah, he was a
Lundgren,
helicopter pilot.
Jet Li. It's just like every action star that you could. It,
That's
I'm
alive today. Yeah.
yeah. I'm almost surprised, although I'm not really surprised, that Seagal hasn't showed up in one of those movies.
I'm upset.
Yeah.
Because he is such an awkward human being, and it just portrays so well even in his own films, like the people, like the B-listers that he works with, right? You can tell just on the way they're acting that they're struggling with that motherfucker. So to see him again return, like to be the B-lister with a bunch of like A-listers again, that would be. Oh, I would watch the fuck out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an odd person. There is, if you're a fan of these old school 80s and 90s action movies,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. It's Spaced Ice. Whoever you are on YouTube, I forget whatever you are. He covers every Van Damme movie and every Seagal movie, but he is unabashedly biased about how much he loves Van Damme. And so every Van Damme movie is the best movie ever made. And then every Steven Seagal movie, is not the worst. He'll come up with the worst things. He's like, this Steven Seagal movie is so bad that it killed Santa Claus in front of your children. Like that's the level of hate that he has for these Seagal movies. And every single, and I if given the choice, I would choose Van Damme over Seagal, but I still don't think all of Van Damme's movies are the best movies ever made. But he is just so funny and he has no qualms about like just being completely biased. I can't tell you the last time I watched a recent Steven Seagal movie. I know he puts them out quite a bit, but for the life of me, I couldn't.
He's still making films.
Oh yeah, dude. And every film has more hair dye in it than the last one.
It's seeping out of the
dude. Yeah, he's got. Yeah, like what is that paint or that material that can't reflect like light?
Oh, nano or phantom black.
Yeah, his hair and his beard are like phantom black now.
That's pretty cool.
I guess
Phantom, but not
Phantom.
It's with a V.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But he's also horribly out of shape, so it's all body doubles for any of the action scenes. And from what these movies are shot like in Eastern Europe, and just kind of, I don't know what the audience. I guess there's an audience for them. There's an audience for everything, I suppose. But
I think he's kind of like U-Ball. I think he's just got money behind him somehow.
I feel like
they're just having a grand old time doing premieres for shitty movies and throwing parties, and you know what I'm saying? Like that's a fantasy I draw for his life.
I feel like Steven Seagal and Tommy Wiseau have like a very similar like presentation of self. Like they come across in a very
they're not
awkward
in
way.
reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not living in the same year that we are.
No.
I will say this about Uwe Ball though. His movies are atrocious, but I've heard that he owns a 5-star Michelin restaurant in Canada.
Yes. Yes. That's what
Tommy
I heard.
So,
Wiseau?
No. You ball.
You ball. Oh, I was like, oh, wow.
so he's got something going for him, and I can't say that for about Seagal. So I guess point to Uwe Ball for that one. So
My biggest regret with Sal is he had a website where he was selling his own like merchandise, like his own brand,
Okay.
his attempt to be a brand,
Mm.
and it bombed. I mean, you could get like tidy whities and everything with like a big W on it, but he had a
Rousseau
sell.
World,
What was it?
Rousseau World, I believe it. Yeah.
I think you're right.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
So
pretty
it
cool.
was very brief, and when it closed down, they had a sale, and they had a package for like 50 items for like $25,
Wow.
and I was smashing the buy button, and it would not work. I was so pissed.
Oh
'cause
no.
I would have loved
Yeah.
to have all this cheap ass Tommy was. You know what I mean?
I want
It's
the
like a
double
full
I
wardrobe.
want the double belt. That's what I want.
Yeah. I wanted the tidy whities. That's not. I wasn't gonna wear them. I was just gonna put them like on the shelf.
Tidy whities, not even like boxer briefs, but just
I
straight.
think that was in there too. Like it was just really weird, like Slavic inspired bad branding. I don't know how else to put it.
Sounds awesome.
So, Chris,
Yeah.
tell us about yourself. I know that you work in mental health. Is that fair to say? Is that a fair way to put it?
I used to. I don't now. Now I do all freelance writing, and editing and podcasting. But yeah, for
Oh wow.
my formal education was it took me 3 times to find the major that I started in music, and then I wanted to be a cop, so I studied law enforcement, and then I settled on psychology. I took a couple psychology courses, and I found them utterly fascinating. And I probably should have gotten the hint. My father's an actual psychiatrist. He went to medical school, and so he's a doctor, and he knows all about the brain, and I guess it runs in the family, so to speak. And yeah, so my formal education is in psychology, and out of college, after I graduated, I worked many a year in a community mental health center, which is kind of like the ideal situation for me, because a lot the jobs in the mental health field are very varied. I mean, people that work in hospitals or group homes or this kind of thing, and being in the community mental health field meant that my job was to keep people out of the hospital, to keep people out of jail, and just to kind of just work with people. That's kind of like what I like to do. I like people. People are fascinating to me. And even the people that you think are the most boring people, everyone's got a story or stories to tell. And sometimes it just takes a little bit more prodding to get it out of them. But no, community mental health meant working in the community. I mean, I had an office at a clinic, but most of my appointments, if the person wasn't a safety risk, I would meet them at their, go to their house or accompany them to doctor's appointments, accompany them to court. And unfortunately, like I said, my biggest thing was to keep people out of the hospital, but sometimes for their own good that, I had to send people to the hospital. It's not something I like to do. But, it happens. But the most surprising thing to me, and after years of experience, I would train the new caseworkers that were coming in. And basically what I would tell them is that, anything that you read in a book in a university classroom is not going to prepare you for someone with severe mental illness. It's just not. You can read about the symptoms, you could read about the diagnosis, you could read the stories, but until you see it face to face, you have no idea. Like
did working with all those people and getting a very sober look at humanity at that level, or just in general, let's say, did that break down any prejudices that you may have had before you started doing it?
No, I was raised in a very I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic school, but I was raised. I lucked out in the parental department. I'll say that. Um, we had interracial friends growing up, so like I and like the thing that I always tell people is like you can't prejudice is not inherited. Like you're taught prejudice, you're taught hatred by
Mhm.
someone, or you see it in someone and that you look up to. So I've never really had that. And I'm the oldest of three boys, and one of my brothers is gay, openly gay. So like I never had the homophobia thing going on. But that being said, I recognize not so much in myself, but how much other people, when they hear the words chronic mental illness, or they hear the word schizophrenia or bipolar, and they immediately have these kind of preconceived notions of what that means,
Mhm.
and they're usually quite negative.
Right.
And a lot of times, I think one of the biggest things that gets misconstrued is that um, a person with mental illness is 9 times more likely to be the victim of a crime than the perpetrator of the crime. And not to say that, people with mental illness are, innocent of anything, but so often, especially when I see these things with like mass shootings or violence and people bring up the mental health issues,
Mhm.
um, that kind of, that'll piss me off because
Yeah. Do you see that as, do you think of that person, let's say like a school shooter, do you think of them as being a victim first before they became an attacker, an abuser, or, became violent? Because that, in my mind, that's how it plays out. Like this person was hurt somehow first. That's how this started. They didn't wake up one morning, generally speaking, I guess, and decide to be, the incarnate of evil. Does that make sense to you?
no, it does. It totally does. But to me, I mean, it would be a long answer, and what I can
Mm.
tell you from years of working with um, dozens of different people with different diagnoses and different problems and whatnot, it's so individualized. And that's another reason why I think when people just throw out mental illness as the cause of something
Mm.
is very unfair, because like I said, the majority of people suffering from mental illness are are going to be some of the kindest people you will meet. Um,
Right.
Far more likely, unfortunately, to hurt themselves than they are to hurt you. Um, and it's so individualized, and I think that throwing blanket terms around really can hurt um, um, things. And it's
Well, yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Have either of you guys ever seen this show Shameless?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
We have a
Okay,
friend that works on it actually.
really? So
Yeah,
I
that's his son right now.
I just started watching that last week, and I'm in season 3.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the storyline. I'm not going to use the word. It's the R word in reference to someone with Down syndrome, and
Yeah.
they're talking about reclaiming the word for themselves. And
Right.
I just thought, wow, what a clever way to handle like a situation like that. Um,
Oh, for
and
the person who suffers, you mean? For them to just claim, yeah, I
yeah,
agree. Yeah.
just like they said that, with homosexuals, with the word queer and all that kind of stuff. Um, and one of the most profound lines in an episode that I just saw a couple of days ago is one of the developmentally disabled people saying like words only have power if we give them power.
I say
And
it all the time. Oh,
yeah,
that's so good.
yeah, and so that's why I think it's really dangerous when we have these horrific events happen, and the like the easy go to answer is, well, this person clearly was mentally ill, and maybe that's not the case. You know, they may have been undiagnosed, but some people are just angry. Some people are just angry. They're not
Yeah. Anger
depressed.
can take you a lot of places.
Yeah.
And I feel like don't you guys feel like there's sort of like a Hollywood mentality for like the description of mental illness? Like it's just synonymous with psychopathy, like violence, you know?
I would definitely say like media wise for sure.
Yeah, they just
like
use it.
Chris is saying, it's always, you know, about violence. It's like, oh, this person was clearly, you know, mentally disturbed. It's like, so therefore, if you're mentally disturbed, you will become violent like
And it
that.
just it removes any what I hate about it is that it seems to remove any desire to want to investigate, to really know why someone would do something terrible.
Well, I think it's more to rationalize for yourself and for other people. It's like, oh, this happened because they were, you know, it gives a reason to it. So it's not just,
Yeah, it excuses it almost though.
well, yeah, but that's, I think that's like the reason they're doing it is to make it easier to digest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like the headline will be mental illness, but if you read the full article, you get like you need the full story, like to really get it. And like I'm sorry, I know Marco. I'm sorry, your name, because you just made a very interesting point.
Zach.
Zach. Zach. You said, you know, it makes it very like digestible for people. It makes it okay. It's like, you know what? It's almost like the government, the media saying like, we have this under control. It's okay. You know, this person was mentally ill. They went off their medication, and this kind of stuff happens. And as much as I just said all this stuff about it not being easy to point the finger, I have seen people, mostly with schizophrenia, when they either go off their medication or the medication isn't as working and they need a change of medication. I've seen what happens, and it can get ugly. It can get. I've never had a violent altercation, but I've had incidents where the police had to be called. I've, you know, look at me, I'm pale white, and one of my clients called me the N-word once. But I don't, and that's another thing with the mental health field is, and working with not only people with mental health issues, but a lot of my clients were co-occurring, which means they also have substance abuse problems. Because it just so happened that the person whose job I took over for was an LCDP, which is a licensed chemical dependency professional. So I inherited her caseload.
Oh,
and
man.
so
I never
I'm
thought of that. Like taking up someone's old job in that field. Holy cow.
Yeah, right. With no prior knowledge of everything that they've been going through, and then you just come in not blind, but you're gonna feel a little blind.
There's a lot to learn, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll get people. It happens so. It would happen often, more so often with the girls that I worked with. That there would be unhealthy preoccupations with some of the clients. We'll put it that way. Sure. But I've had that happen to me. I had a woman. I don't even. I guess it would be like a reverse Oedipus complex kind of thing going on, where she very much saw me as like a son, but also as a sexual object. Needless to say that she, you know, we weren't working together after all this came to light, but you know, it's just, you know, it's just weird stuff. And again, when you're dealing with health of any kind, whether it be mental or physical, it's so individualized. And so you have to be able to, you have to be able to wear a lot of hats in the mental health field, because to some people, you're a counselor. To other people who are very high functioning, and just to maintain, you know, just to maintain their benefits, it was through the state for insurance and for money for disability. They would have to see a caseworker. So I would have clients that I would see once a month, clients that I would see twice a month. Then we'd go to the clients that you would see every day, that we would have to sit there and watch them take their medication, because if we weren't there, they weren't going to take their medication.
Yeah.
So it's you wear a lot of hats, but I loved it because I wasn't cooped up in an office. I made my own schedule. I could go, you know, and just make sure, as long as my treatment plans were done and people got to their appointments, I got to really, it's a lot of flexibility. And if you had a particularly difficult client, we'd have you would we'd have some clients that I wouldn't trade for the world, that I would just be like, I wouldn't, because once I train new people, I would, my caseload would go up and then it would go down, and there were certain clients that I would transfer to other people, and there was certain clients that I would never even the thought would never cross my mind of transferring to someone else, because I worked so well with them. And then there was other clients that, I'm not going to name names here, obviously, but I couldn't wait to get to somebody else. Just
yeah. What is it like
please.
working with other people in that field? I mean, when you're dealing with so many human problems in reality like that, you start to look at your coworkers differently. How much interaction do you require from other people in the office or other doctors and things like that?
Oh,
Is it a different sort of atmosphere?
It's a very collaborative atmosphere. We actually had, the clinic would have teams, and the teams would have a team leader, one or two doctors, two nurses, a licensed therapist, substance abuse counselor, occupational therapist. So there would be a lot of interacting with everything. And then, like, the first hour of every day is a team meeting where you would go over the doctor's schedule, because these poor doctors would have hundreds of patients. So you got to kind of remind, because some of the clients are very memorable, because whatever reason they smell really bad, or they just because of their illness, they might exhibit some very funny behaviors, or say ridiculous things that clearly aren't true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they would have other ones that would kind of fly under the radar. So you kind of have to remind the doctor and give them an update, be like, so and so is doing well, they want to talk to you about this medication, that kind of stuff. So you have to be very organized, and you just got to be very flexible, because, like I said, it's a team kind of thing. And say somebody calls out, and so then the team leader would have to look at their schedule, and then they'd have to prioritize. Like, if you're taking someone, like, if I had, if I wanted an easy day, I would schedule like 3 people to go grocery shopping, because they would get like they get their food stamp EBT card. So a lot of the clients would need rides to the grocery stores. And that's what I would do. Schedule an hour and a half to take people grocery shopping. But if somebody calls out on the team and they have clients that need to get to court, or they need to get to the hospital for procedure, that obviously takes precedence over taking some of the Stop and Shop. So you got to be flexible, because you would be covering for a lot of other people. Somebody goes on vacation, someone's got to cover their clients for everything. So it is very much a team effort. So you're never alone in the fight, which is good.
Yeah.
Because yeah. But then again,
to help attack the same problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
when you encounter like extreme mental illness, like schizophrenia and things like that, is there a healing? Like, can you like quote unquote fix this situation, or is it just like you're just treating the symptom, trying to get them to a state of normalcy, or how does that work?
Again, it's very personalized, but we'll just go with an extreme. Well, I would say the most extreme form of mental illness is people that are acute schizophrenia, which means auditory. Most often, it's just auditory hallucinations. Some of them would have visual hallucinations, and some of them would have olfactory hallucinations, which are smells.
Oh,
Yeah, just like and that's the thing about these hallucinations. Like if you talk to like a druggy kind of person, like, oh man, that's awesome hallucinations all day. No, schizophrenia is not like that. The things that are being and this is terrible. This is why it's a horrible, horrible disease. Is that the things that these people are hearing 90% of the time are terrible, terrible things about themselves.
yeah.
And they're hearing voices from people that they know. They'll be hearing voices of family members. If I worked with a client long enough, I wouldn't even have to ask. I would know that every once in a while they would be hearing my voice in their head, and God bless them for that. I could, if I had to hear my own voice in my head, I don't know what I would do. But
I think I've got an issue. I hear my voice in my head all day long. But this gives me some insight,
my
though.
mind attacks me all the time. I couldn't imagine being schizophrenic and then having like an entity within inside my mind attacking me as well. It's like, oh my gosh, like that would be awful.
Well, there's a psychologist. Have you ever heard of Guy Winch?
No,
he's a psychologist I found on YouTube, and he had a great story to like put it to framing what we're talking about. Is like a woman who had a long relationship, she broke up, so she finally gets back in the dating scene, and she meets this wonderful guy, and they date, and they have this wonderful love affair for 6 months, and then he plans a special dinner, so she thinks he's going to pop the question, and instead he breaks up with her. So again, she's devastated now, right? Her life is destroyed. So she starts listening to a friend, and her friend starts telling her, you're terrible. Well, of course he doesn't like you. You're getting old. You're fat. You're, all these things are wrong about you. And that friend is her. That's the first person to attack us is ourselves. So we just beat ourselves up. And I often wonder, like, obviously this is a very amateur, and I don't know what else to call it, but opinion of like the mind. But I've always had the belief that we all suffer from dementia. Like none of it, like we're all like just a little crazy, or we are just crazy, and we edit it, we manage it, like our weird thoughts and our weird impulses, and maybe that's what we call normal. Does that make sense?
The ability to edit and to filter.
Yeah, like that's what a normal person's ability really is just to ignore or edit the crazy that just enters our mind, that the constant negative attack that we all seem to have on ourselves. Yeah, it's very strange.
Or just being like, you overthink a casual encounter, like at someone at the 7-Eleven. You're like you're walking out with your gallon of milk, and you're just like, did I piss that person off for some reason? And it's just like your overactive imagination kind of going, but like, or you overanalyze something, or people that have to plan out conversations before they have it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
If you're gonna.
I always like think about what I'm gonna say before.
Well, a comedian said it well once. He's like, humans are weird. He's like, you ever do something awkward and then think about it for 7 years?
Yeah, exactly. But going back to your question, unfortunately, someone with schizophrenia, the best that we can do is to find the right medication regimen, keep them to it, hopefully find them a place to live outside of a group home. Like I said, our clinic had group homes, but I never worked in the group homes. All my people were in the community, so like we want to foster independent living, despite the fact that you might have at one period in history. I mean, if it's the history of the way mental illness has been treated, that's just a whole. We could have a whole talk about that with the asylums and electroshock therapy and lobotomies, like that kind of stuff.
That's crazy. We talked a little bit about that in a podcast in the past, but I even have an aunt who went through electroshock therapy in the 80s, and it did damage to her. It caused mental illness, if that makes sense. Obviously, if you're electrocuting your brain, what do you think is going to happen? But they still do ECT treatments. It's very rare now. It's like for very specific conditions, but it does work.
Yeah,
Huh.
for like seizures and stuff
You're
too,
right.
right?
For seizures and migraines, it's not even so much mental
Right?
illness. It's like the physical part of the brain that's causing seizures and migraines. That's the kind of thing that it's
Good
helpful
for.
for. It's not you can't zap these voices out of the head. That's just not happening. And unfortunately, there's no cure for that. So the best we could do is get you on one of the most popular drugs that 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 treats schizophrenia is a drug called Invega, which is usually an injection, and but it's so good to see this progression go from clients that would have to get an injection every couple of weeks, then every month, and now it's every 3 months. So like you don't have to keep.
Really?
Yeah, because that's like the worst. Like, who wants to get
Yeah.
a shot every? I'm not. I
Is
don't
it
have
like in the
diabetes.
arm, or is it like in the base of the head or anything? Does it
I
matter?
think it's in the arm. I
Yeah,
don't like needles, which is odd for
yeah.
someone who works in the health field. Like I won't even look when they're taking my blood.
Oh, I need to
Excuse
watch.
me.
Otherwise, it freaks me out if I'm not watching.
Well, I worked with a nurse that didn't like the sight of blood. So yeah, I don't think it's odd. I mean, people are people. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
So once you find the right medication, does it ever stop working for that person and then you need to switch, or do they like build tolerances? How does that work?
You could build a tolerance for it, or unfortunately, it's just like any other illness. You get a fever, you get the flu. Sometimes you get the flu; it's worse than others, and like sometimes symptoms of their mental illness, they become more symptomatic. They'll become more manic, or they'll be displaying more abstract thinking, just bizarre. They would make very bizarre claims. And that's the thing when you're dealing with someone. And that's the thing. This is what I learned. One of the things I had to ask my dad. I was like, when you have a client or a patient, whatever you call them, who's clearly telling you something that you know is not true, just because like it's based in fact. Like I had a client that swore he was half vampire and had metal legs, even though I've seen his legs, they are not metal. And I don't subscribe to the fact that we are living in a world of vampires. But it's like you do no help by disagreeing with them. It's just you're wasting your time. You're going to
Yeah.
frustrate them. You're going to frustrate yourself. You use phrases like, I believe that you believe this.
So you're more like trying to lead them out rather than convince them.
Right. And there are certain clients where I like, and I shouldn't do this, but sometimes I would bring out some of like, especially when I'm training someone. Like there are certain clients I know that are harmless, so I could kind of bring out some of the quote unquote crazy in them. I would know what the kind of questions to ask them to bring out some bizarre stories about like how they're you know how they actually created Superman and like they want to sue DC and all this kind of crazy stuff. Like
I tell you,
I've heard
I
all
thought you
these
meant like
crazy.
they made a Superman. I was like, that'd be
Right?
a good
No, I had
movie.
what I.
Maybe we start writing.
He was like, yeah, I created Superman and Swamp Thing, and so I was just out of the blue. I was just like, well, that's very interesting. Have you created any superheroes lately? And his answer to me, without skipping a beat, was Super B. And I was like, oh, Super B, half man, half bee. He goes, you got it, Super B. So if we do ever see a Super B, I have a client in Rhode Island that needs some
You know the
some
author.
money for that. He did come up with that.
Yeah, it's called the B movie.
I wonder if I would always be suspicious, even when I'm helping people at the times I have in my life, right? I'm always a little suspicious about how clever they are. Do you ever feel like or detect or have the inclination that some people were just playing you to see if you would keep lying to them to sort of test your I don't know, not your resolve, but maybe your compassion to see, because sometimes people do that. I feel like they say crazy things just to test others' compassion to see if they really care about them, for example, to see how far they're willing to go to listen to their bullshit. Let's call it.
Not so much listen to their bullshit, but to see what they could get away with.
Yeah.
Like I had a chronic shoplifter, and most of the time, if I take someone to the store and they ask me not to go in with them, I'll respect their wishes because I dress. It was an office job, so I'm dressed in dress shirt, tucked in slacks, and they're dressed in like it kind of looks kind of weird. So sometimes they didn't like that. She was not allowed to go into any store that if I'm taking you to the store, I'm going with you because I know you will steal. God bless her. She was one of my favorites. She would ask me all the time, Chris, it's Christmas is coming up. Like, what can I get you? And I was like, first of all, it's not appropriate that you get me anything. Second of all, I know that anything that you do get me will be stolen goods. So it's just like
it's not a trouble at all. I can get you whatever you want.
Or just like
flash use TV. Yeah, I can fit that. Why not?
Or if they're in court with them and they would say, well, can you put in a good word for me? And I would say, listen, you and I both know our history together. If I'm ever, what do you call it? Called in to testify or whatever, I have to tell the truth. I was like, do you really like? I was like, I'm not gonna lie for you. I like you as a person, and I want to see you get help, but I'm not gonna lie in a court of law just so that you can get out of trouble for that kind of thing. So the thing is, you got to really establish boundaries. You can't be you can't be a placemat, and because they'll walk all over you. Not a placemat. What am I thinking of? Welcome mat. They'll walk all over you, but you also can't be like so stuck in the mud. Kind of person that you can't occasionally bend the rules and that kind of stuff, and it's really a give and take. And at the end of the day, the people, and that's like they deserve the same. Just because they're mentally ill doesn't mean that they don't deserve the same amount of respect that you and I deserve. So it's difficult.
Hey folks, that's the end of our first conversation with Chirs D from Cult Film Companion. Be sure to check out Cult Film Companion on Twitter. Also, don't forget that you can listen to your favorite podcasts, including Audio Pong, on any platform that you like. Find us on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for part 2 in the near future.